Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to do a spotlight on NDC, which is a topic I'm sure you're all interested in hearing more information about. I'm Judy Howard in our Operations and Customer Experience area here at ARC, and I'm really happy to be able to have some real experts here with me this afternoon that are going to be on the phone. Our main presenter is Jennifer Briede, and she's been with ARC for over 10 years. She's been with ARC, sorry about that, because I have some notes from before, but she's been with us for a long time, and in the area of product management, she has over 17 years. Jennifer has managed several products here at ARC, and her main focus right now is in the settlement area and NDC. Also with me on the phone here this afternoon, I have Todd Wallace, and Todd has just been with ARC for over a year. He's come to us with a lot of experience, and he was with Sabre for over 20 years. He's been with the Airlines, JetBlue, Spirit, Frontier, and his main focus here at ARC is really on those relationships with our GDSs and technology providers. So again, he's here to answer questions as well along with Jennifer and to provide some information in the presentation this afternoon. And also, we have an expert here. A lot of you know Shelley Younger here at ARC. She's headed up our debit memo working group. She's been involved in with IATA. She's given lots of presentations if you've been at our Travel Connect conferences and other conferences in the industry as well. And Shelley's been with ARC now for over 14 years, and she came to us from American Airlines with a real focus in the debit memo area. But Shelley's main job now is a focus on all the strategic relationships that we have in the agency world, the airlines, technology providers, and she really heads up our strategic strategy in regards to NDC in one order. So that's our kind of our roll call today for guest presenters. And this afternoon, I encourage you all to ask the questions that you have. I've gotten some questions before the webinar, and we have our gurus here. So please go to your right-hand side into the control panel and type in your questions. Everyone will be muted on the call this afternoon. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Jennifer because I want all of you to have the opportunity to answer your questions, ask your questions, and have them answered. Just so you know, the ones that don't get answered, we will follow up with you. So Jennifer, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Judy, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for joining today to listen to more about NDC. So what I'm going to cover in the presentation today, I'm going to do a quick NDC refresher because I'm sure there's a lot of people on the call today, some of you in various stages of either learning about NDC or working already with partners on NDC. So I want to talk just a little bit about review a little bit about what NDC is. We'll talk about where things stand today with airlines and GDSs. I know that's a big topic of conversation, and we get a lot of questions about that. I know agencies want to know, how they get started with NDC for those of you who might not have, done much work in this area yet. And then we'll talk a bit about what ARC has to offer in the way of NDC, and then we'll wrap up and answer questions. So NDC is a travel industry supported program for the development and adoption of a new data transmission standard. It's really just a set of standard XML schemas used for searching, pricing, booking, ticketing, payment, servicing of transactions. So it really marks the switch from one data language to another. And I'll talk about this just a little bit more here in a couple more slides, but really moving from the old EDIFACT messaging technology into a new, more modern technology of XML. And one of the things I like to point out when talking about NDC, because it can be kind of confusing, is that really NDC is the technology. It's not a specific system or a specific website or maybe a database. It really is the technology behind all of that. So it's with various IT providers who will make it into some more specific systems or software that you're using. NDC is a standard that was created by IATA with the help of the industry. So we could come up with one standard for the industry. And because it's one standard, then it can be used by multiple technology providers because, again, it is a standard. So just to cover a little bit about what problems NDC solves. So in the airline retailing world, there are some challenges out there that airlines have with current distribution frameworks that have been in place for a long time. So airline sales channels, which mean the different places where travelers can purchase airline tickets, in those different channels, such as the airline website, an airport kiosk, through a travel agent. Airlines can't offer the same product in all of these different channels today. And the reason for that is just as technology's progressed from the internet and, it's progressed where in some channels, things have become more advanced than in other channels. So, so they're fragmented, they're not all the same. Also, airlines, because of that, they don't always know who it is that's shopping. And so, again, I'm going to cover this a little bit more in a few slides here, why that's important to note. But with NDC, with the new distribution capability, what this provides is the ability for airlines to deliver a consistent experience to the traveler, no matter where they're shopping. And it enables them to differentiate their products with personal and customized fares and offers. So you can only imagine if you have a traveler that's a business traveler that has, maybe 20 trips a year they're taking, that they might have something different than they're looking for in their airline product when they're flying from one place to another, than someone who's maybe a leisure traveler who might, take 1 or 2 trips a year, and maybe they're more concerned simply with price and just getting on the plane and getting from point A to point B. So NDC allows airlines to focus more on the increased revenues from the ancillary products that they want to offer to. And then also it allows them to use modern technology to provide rich content, which, again, I'll explain a little bit more about rich content and what that is, because I think that comes up a lot when talking about NDC, and not sure everybody knows exactly what that means. So in the traditional agency channel, the EDIFACT messaging is what was used or is currently used, has been used. And just a reminder, really is pre-internet technology. So it's just an older technology that's there, and because of that, it's just more limited to what can be offered through that messaging type, through EDIFACT. So through EDIFACT, in the GDS search results, when an agent is searching for a flight, they're going to basically see the results that are mainly showing the routes and availability information. So it's really a one-size-fits-all approach, because the search results aren't tailored to a specific traveler. They don't really know who's asking. It's the same result no matter who's asking for that information. So airlines want agents to be able to see more of what travelers can see when they're shopping in other channels, as an example, on their .com websites, to be able to differentiate their products. So to see things and be able to sell extra things like ancillaries like extra legroom, extra bags, seating class upgrades, meals, Wi-Fi, all those kind of extra things. And again, because airlines can offer that enhanced booking experience on their websites and other channels, they really want that shopping experience to be consistent and seamless no matter where the traveler is shopping. So with NDC, using the XML schema, which again, just as a reminder, is post-internet technology, just a more modern technology and way to do this, basically allows for a more rich experience. So with that comes the rich content. And what this really is I just say in simple terms, it's pretty pictures. But it's really the ability for the agent to see what is being offered. So perhaps a picture of a meal, perhaps a picture of the the legroom, that's offered on a specific flight. Maybe it's not even a picture per se, but it's just the way that things are presented on the screen. I know it's probably a little small on my screen here, but the screenshot towards the bottom is a screenshot from United's website, and it just has like a basic, a standard, an enhanced, a premium, and a luxury category. So there's not really a picture here, but it does organize things in a better way to where it's just presented more richly, that content that's available to the agent. So when agents have this content presented this way and are able to have that richer experience, they can better understand what the airline is offering and what the different offers are. They can compare them better, and then they can better educate their clients. So, and again, it allows the airlines to offer that same offer through the travel agent channel as they do on their airline website.
And Jennifer, a question has come in. So just to be clear, that's being asked, an airline then can offer different customers a different view of the products that they will be able to provide?
Yep, so the airline would be able to offer, because in some cases they know, who's asking, they know more about that customer and potentially their travel patterns and what they've booked before. So they're able to offer, something more customized to that particular traveler with NDC.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jennifer.
Okay. All right, so another thing I just want to mention that comes up a lot when talking about NDC and some of this terminology that can be confusing is you might have heard Omnichannel Experience and kind of wondering what that really means. Really, all this means is kind of what I've already been talking about. It's just that airlines can offer the same products with the seamless customer experience no matter where the traveler is shopping. So again, whether they're shopping on the airline website, whether they're using their computer, or maybe they're using their mobile phone, mobile device, or a tablet, maybe they're shopping at the airport kiosk, or again with the travel agency, just that it's that same experience from the customer perspective, and the airlines are able to offer the same thing no matter where the customer is shopping. Okay. It's really just what omni-channel means.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay, so this next slide, just wanted to quickly review kind of in this way with the chart, illustrating the current agency channel distribution process as it exists today, and then what's different with NDC. So today, the airline works with third parties such as ATPCO and CETA to file fares and schedules. And then the GDS builds an offer from the schedule, from the fare rules and availability each time an agent does a search. In the new NDC world, the biggest difference is that the GDS no longer builds the offer because the airline controls and builds the offer, similar to how they would build that offer on their own website. So I just want to, I know this is a little bit of a busy chart, but just want to point out kind of visually that's really kind of, one of the biggest differences between the traditional agency channel and NDC.
Okay. Jennifer, I'm just going to take a minute to just interject this question. This one is really concerning British Airways, and the gist of it, I believe, is if an agency is using NDC with British Airways, they will be able to see all of the seats that are available in the different seating categories, because it sounds like what's happening with this agency right now, they'll go in to their GDS, they'll look at a class of service, it'll be sold out, and then they'll go directly on to British Airways website, and there'll still be seats left in that seating category. Can any, Jennifer, Shelley, Todd talk to that point?
So the short answer, this is Shelley Younger, by the way, and the short answer to your question is yes. In the case of British Airways, it's not necessarily the case of every airline, so this, again, is specific to British Airways. British Airways may have content, in this case, certain class of seats, inventory, that would be available directly. So if I go to their website, or if I connect directly to them using NDC, you might be able to see inventory that is not necessarily filed with the GDS. So the answer to your question is yes, that is definitely a possibility. There are other airlines that do that too. Primarily in Europe, you're seeing a lot of that right now in Europe, but British Airways is definitely one of them.
Okay, thank you, Shelley.
And one way to get to that content.
Yes, that's what was going to be my follow-up question.
I can see your face, Judy. And one way to get to that content is to set up a connection with them using NDC. Now, and Jennifer can get into this a little bit more, but there are several different ways to do that. You don't have to actually build that link yourself. You can go through other parties, but one way to get to that content, the primary way, is going to be connect directly to them so they can build that offer and you get access to that inventory.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shelley, and thank you, Jennifer. And who asked that question, if there's still any follow-up that you require, just write that back in and we'll try to get to that. Thank you both.
Okay, so I'm going to move on then, just to kind of move on into where do things stand today with NDC. So you've all probably heard about IATA and their NDC certification. Again, you know, the NDC standard was created by IATA in conjunction with industry. They have 4 certification levels. I think we started off with 3, and I believe last year we added a 4th. But basically, the certification validates that NDC messaging meets the IATA NDC standard. There are 61 airlines who have registered to be NDC certified at levels 1, 2, 3, or 4. And this could be level 1 is just basic, so basic shopping and ancillaries post-booking. Level 2 is offer management. Level 3 is offer and order management. And level 4 is NDC at scale. I believe that level 1 is probably going to be going away. And again, I mentioned level 4 they added last year, NDC at scale. Really, this one is more the ability for airlines to process, you know, higher volumes of NDC as airlines and agencies, you know, begin to work together on NDC and move forward with it and actually start implementing and having transactions go through. They expect that kind of, again, level 1, more basic, to go away and moving more into the level 4 at scale. An airline can implement NDC with ARC without being certified, as can an agency. However, agencies may want to check with the airlines you're working with, as an airline might ask you to be certified possibly with IATA, but from ARC's perspective, we're not requiring anybody to be NDC certified that we're working with. Airlines are at various phases and use different strategies, and we're going to talk a bit more about that here in a few minutes. You'll find that many airlines have information on their websites about their NDC strategies. And really, NDC is similar to direct connections, something that I know we did hear more in the past, but kind of very similar to that model of just direct connecting an airline with an agency. IATA has a group of Leaderboard airlines they're working with who have committed to having 20% of their sales powered by an NDC API by 2020. You may have heard about this, and this just, I've just put the different airlines here that are part of the Leaderboard.
Jennifer, a question has come in, and I think I'm getting this right, or the essence of it correct. If someone is processing through, using NDC today, using an NDC connection, they're saying that if they call and have questions about that, there's really no process in place to be able to service those bookings. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and maybe what agents may be experiencing, if you guys have heard that same issue?
So I'll start, and then Shelley or Todd, please chime in, add to what I will say. But basically, as airlines are implementing NDC, they're all kind of going about this in different ways depending on their different strategies. and making different decisions and selections on kind of how they want NDC to work, and also which types of transactions they're sending through NDC. So if they're, a lot of times what we're finding is they're starting out more with just straight sales and kind of starting there and then moving into more of, adding on refunds and exchanges and that sort of thing more on the servicing side, especially if they're working with corporate clients, if the agency is working with corporate clients. So, that could maybe not be in place right away potentially, depending on the airline strategy and how they're implementing. So I think that's something, and again, I'm going to cover here a little bit more some of the things that you all might want to be having discussions to airlines about when you're talking to them about NDC, and the things that, you want to make sure you understand when you're working with them on NDC. Obviously, that's one of the things that's probably pretty important, what their plan is around that servicing. I don't know, Shelley, Todd, if you want to add anything to that.
So, Jennifer, that's one of the reasons, or I should say challenges faced in implementing or rolling out NDC here in the United States. And yes, and you always kind of have to start somewhere. So many of the airlines have started with basic shopping, booking, ticketing, payment activities. A lot of them don't have subsequent servicing in place yet. And I will say this, they're kind of band-aiding it for the moment, but those are conversations that they have with the agency when they're going into an initial relationship. And that doesn't always work for the agency. So it may not be a right fit right away, but I can absolutely tell you it's recognized that has to be in place, and that's part of that level 4 at scale, is that to say that you be able to do shopping, booking, ticketing, payment, exchanges, refunds, seat upgrades, so pretty much everything that you can do through the GDS so the agency can service your customer, you should be able to do with NDC. It's just that everybody is at a different stage right now. So those are definitely questions that the agency will want to ask the airline, or when the GDSs, and I know you're going to get into that, sort of play a role in connecting. That'll be questions that will need to be asked around what functionality is being offered right now. But they're all working towards offering all of the functionality. So they're just different stages.
Okay, so it sounds like it's just kind of a work in progress at this point.
Kind of baby steps, if you will.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shelley. So I'm going to turn it over to Todd for a couple minutes to talk about the GDSs and kind of where they stand today with NDC.
Thank you, Jennifer, Judy, and Shelley. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Todd Wallace, Industry Relationship Manager at ARC. I'm responsible for acting as a liaison between ARC and our GDS and technology provider partners. We wanted to give you a bit of an update on where the GDSs stand, and of course many of you may have been talking with your GDSs as well, but as you're probably all aware, each of the GDSs has a major NDC project underway. It's probably one of the most significant things that they have in development at this time. In order for us to be able to reach the travelers necessary to meet the IATA 2020 mandate or initiative that Jennifer was just referring to, that 20 airlines, 20% of the passengers, and by 2020, one of those critical dependencies to be able to achieve that is the availability of this NDC content in the agency environment. And one of the ways that we're going to be able to get that content into the agency environment is through our GDS systems that are used so heavily. Since a significant portion of agencies rely on their GDSs as their technology providers, the work that the GDSs are doing right now is essential to making NDC a success. Just to give you a brief update on kind of where each stands, Amadeus has their NDCX effort. That's their kind of branded name for the NDC initiatives underway. They plan to integrate content into the Amadeus Selling Platform Connect. So that means both NDC and non-NDC or traditional content will show up in that platform. Amadeus has some live NDC bookings in production right now via their new NDC-enabled web services, but those aren't offered yet in the U.S., to my knowledge. But we expect to see Amadeus working with U.S. agencies this year. They have said that they believe that they will accelerate even more in 2020 as well. So you'll see more to come from Amadeus. Saber's particular initiative is called Beyond NDC, and they've recently launched their NDC APIs with United Airlines and a limited set of agency customers. Saber's integrating their NDC content into the Saber Red desktop. And again, this is so that you can see as an agent, if you're using that platform to do your bookings, you'll be able to see both NDC and traditional content. Saber's in the process of acquiring Farelogix. Farelogix is another system that's been very involved in the introduction of NDC. And I know Saber is looking to help them, this acquisition will help them rapidly advance their NDC offering. Farelogix has been a key player in the industry in terms of the introduction, the development of standards, and the change required to introduce NDC to the agency community. And then thirdly, Travelport was the first GDS to issue NDC transactions in the United Kingdom through a local agency there. They did this last year, and they've continued to add airlines and agencies to their offering. NDC is an extension of the Travelport rich content and branding merchandising solution, and they're offering this through their SmartPoint desktop. So as we were talking about earlier, in the NDC world, the GDS will serve as an aggregator. This is a bit of a new term in the industry. There are lots of aggregators that are working through the IATA certification process, and the GDSs are just a portion of those. Some of the other aggregators, you may be familiar with names like Travel Fusion or Air Gateway or Atras, and those are creating pipes between the airlines and the agencies, similar to what the format that a GDS serves today. But the GDSs are also in the process of becoming aggregators, and these initiatives that I just talked about with NDCX and Beyond NDC and the Travelport program, those are all part of the GDSs becoming aggregators. In an aggregator role, the GDS will be the pipe for the transaction, but the airline will actually be the one issuing the offer and doing the ticketing. So that's a bit unlike today's world, where the GDS compiles the availability, the fares, and the various components of the offer and issues the ticket on the airline's behalf. So there's a different setup in terms of the way that transaction is issued. I will say each of the GDSs has extensive information on their websites. I would encourage you to invest some time in researching their sites. There are tons of videos and white papers and other great information about NDC that's available, and each of the initiatives that they have going on.
Okay, great, Todd. That's awesome. A lot of good information there. Have a question?
Sure.
May have a couple. One of the questions is, they're a multi-GDS shop, so to speak, and they're just trying to understand how do they choose a solution, and they don't really want to spend money to develop the APIs, and so what are some of the solutions, or do you have any advice how that even gets started to do this?
What a great segue.
Okay.
Thank you for that question. So the next slide is all about getting started with NDC. So perfect segue into this section of the presentation. And we'll start really with some of the topics you might talk about with your GDS or other aggregators in this space. Certainly, there are lots of things to keep in mind here. We talked about what an aggregator is. It serves as that intermediary between the airline and the agency. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a GDS, but it likely can be. So some of the topics and questions you might want to ask here, what is the GDS's strategy? What is the aggregator's strategy? And what's their timeline for implementing NDC? What markets are they looking at going into first? And what types of agencies? We seem to see a lot of activity focusing around corporate travel, particularly. But what types of agencies will they be working with? Will that GDS display both NDC and non-NDC in a seamless fashion in the tools that you're using? You want to be able to try to not disrupt your workflow as much as possible. So the ability to stay in one tool and one platform and to be able to use that for all of your bookings would be a great solution for you. And then how that implementation is going to impact your agency business and if there are economic terms involved. Again, these are the kinds of discussions you'll want to have specific to your arrangement, your agency, and the GDS that you're using.
That's great, Todd, because there were a few questions that came in regarding that information. And when they had asked, like, how do they get started, there was a question that came in as well. Does ARC help with this at all? Or is it really strictly between the agency, the GDS, the airline? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. We want to be a part of this process. One of the other questions that's certainly very important for many agencies is, what kind of information, what kind of reporting tools are there? Am I going to get these transactions on my back office file? Am I going to be able to reconcile those? Will they show up within IAR if it's our interactive agent reporting tool? So we definitely are happy to be a part of those conversations. We want to be part of those conversations. We're working with many airlines and their test agencies already, other technology providers, and some of the GDSs. We're certainly looking forward to doing more of that as we move forward, because we think it's important that we try to keep to the same processes that we have in place and to be able to have access to the kinds of data that your agency is accustomed to getting today.
Yeah, that's good information, Todd, because we do have some questions coming in with concerns of, how does this work for an agency on, their day-to-day? How does, like you said, with IAR, their back office systems, refunds, exchanges, that's some concerns that agents have when using NDC.
Right. And again, this, it comes down to the agreement that you have with the airline as an agency, the agreement that you have with a particular airline. In terms of what services are available, how the transactions are going to be processed, where the credit card billing or the cash settlement is done. I mean, all of those pieces are things to keep in mind. And so we want to make sure that, as you're having those conversations, that you're thinking about those things and keeping ARC in mind as well. And we're certainly willing to help do anything we can to make that process as seamless as possible to what you're doing today.
Great, and I think that's one of our stronger messages here today is that ARC is available to help. So our customers that are sort of bewildered by this, it's a lot of information to take in, that we're here to help. Yep. And we can help answer their questions. So that's really great. Just one other question before we turn it back over to Jennifer for the team here is, I think, Todd, you had mentioned the GDS acts more as a pipeline in the NDC transaction. The airline basically does the ticketing. The agent then, question is, what control did they have then over the ticket, the agent? What control did they have over that ticket?
And again, that will come back to the arrangement that you have as an NDC participant with the individual airline as far as what they will want you to do, what they will want you to handle from a servicing perspective. In some cases, we've had some airlines that have said, We want the customer to come back to us for servicing. And again, we don't really play a role in that. That's the arrangement between the agent and the airline. But I would work out those details in terms of what you can do with that transaction once it's issued. We have other instances where the airline says, we don't want to handle that. We want the agency to be able to do all of those things. The voids, refunds, exchanges, any of the types of functionality that they have today, they want them to be able to continue to do that. So it's a bit of a mixed bag right now.
Yeah, and I think some things probably, as we keep evolving and NDC keeps moving forward, a lot of these things will be kind of hammered out as NDC becomes more of the commonplace instead of, something new that we're experiencing now, I think, is what everybody's feeling in the industry, a little bit is growing pain.
Well, and as Shelley mentioned earlier, I mean, some of the messaging just simply has not been in place. Providing the offer, making the sale, I won't say it's easy, but it's easier than the servicing aspects of doing refunds and exchanges. I mean, we all know how complicated those things get. And that's one of the reasons I think why it's gotten left to the end, but it's also critical. So we know those have to be solved in order to get the kind of penetration with NDC that the airlines want.
Great, thank you very much, Todd. And Shelley just has one more question
Just something to add on. Todd summed it up very, very well. I will say this, that in our conversations with many of the large U.S. airlines, they absolutely understand the need for the agency to be able to service that transaction. And so most of them are very focused on getting those servicing NDC messages up and running. That's not to say they may not pilot just basic ticket issuance with a few of the agencies, but I want to sort of make sure that those on the phone really know that the big U.S. airlines absolutely understand the importance of servicing. So they are working hard to make sure that the agency can be able to initiate those servicing requests through NDC to the airline. So they're all working very hard on that.
Great, Shelley. No, thanks for adding that on. I think any information that you all have is helpful for our folks on the webinar this afternoon. Jennifer, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. So just to kind of continue on with, how do you get started with NDC? I mean, that was fantastic, Todd, kind of talking about from the GDS perspective and digging in a little bit more to that. These next couple of slides I just have are just really, from ARC's perspective, just as we think about it, topics for you to consider as you're thinking about NDC, again, knowing just like the airlines, a lot of you are probably in various stages of where you are with this. So if you haven't already, some of the topics you probably want to discuss internally at your agency are, if you're just at the very beginning, research NDC and what it means for your agency's business strategy. Does your agency need to take any steps right now? Maybe you do, or maybe you don't, depending on what your strategy is. If you haven't already reached out to your strategic partners, the airlines, GDSs that you're working with, possibly technology companies, if you're using corporate booking tools, and customers, start initiating discussions again, if you haven't already, on how best you might be able to partner with them around NDC, possibly. And then based on how an airline implements NDC will drive a lot of additional questions that you have, as Todd kind of started to talk about. What is the impact to your ticketing process? Will there be any special handling for post-ticket services? I mean, we just kind of talked a little bit about that. Maybe that's not all in place right now, but as Shelley and Todd have said, the airlines are working very hard to put those in place as well. How will any performance agreements or commission discount contracts you have be impacted? Will there be any impact to the agency's customer invoicing or servicing? How will NDC transactions be integrated, again, into corporate booking tools you might have? So again, just things to consider and think about as you're starting down this path. Some specific things for airlines as you're reaching out to the different airlines. that you might be working with. Again, some topics and questions, you might want to ask them because, again, their strategies and how they're implementing NDC is different. So you want to make sure you understand exactly what their plans are. Want to understand their strategy and their timeline to implement NDC. What types of messages, are they supporting now? What types of messages maybe they're supporting for the future? Because again, it's kind of a little bit of baby steps. Maybe they're starting with possibly only, certain types of messages and then moving in the future into adding more. Again, we talked a lot about post-sale servicing. What does that look like, again, right now and then maybe for the future? What fare types will be available through the different airlines and their implementations. They may have different types of fares available through NDC. What payment types are supported? Are they supporting all payment types? Are credit and debit forms of payment types supported? How will credit card chargebacks be managed? And then another really important item is commissions. If your agency has any type of upfront commission contract, you need to kind of talk through how that will be applied through NDC, because likely that'll be different than what you have today. So what should your agency do next? Again, I know this is a lot to take in, especially for those of you who are just kind of getting into this and starting along the path of NDC, but we encourage travel agencies, again, to reach out to your key airline partners and GDSs, really to just start getting those details around their NDC roadmap. And you might want to think about, several factors of how you approach NDC, looking at your specific agency and your strategy and what you're looking to do, your agency size and your model, the types of customers you have, your technology resources and budget, the markets you're focused on. And I'm going to talk here in a few minutes about, some of the resources that are out there from ARC, from the GDSs, from IATA. We all have webinars, industry events. Judy's going to cover here in a minute some more information about ARC's Travel Connect that's coming up in October. I think we'll have some sessions there focused on NDC. We've been pretty active on social media, on LinkedIn, doing quite a few posts around this topic. And on our website, we do have some information on NDC as well. So implementing with ARC, just really quick as a kind of a reminder, we made some enhancements to our settlement system in February of 2018 to support NDC, where we can now accept multiple file formats from airlines using our traditional SPERF file format, which is ARC's file format, but we can now also accept a REP file format from airlines with their sales transactions, and that's an IATA format, so we can now intake that as well. We've integrated with IATA's NDC link, and that's important because now airlines that are sending multi-country files to IATA with NDC transactions can also send U.S. transactions that way as well. IATA will parse out those transactions and send those over to ARC for U.S. transactions. So it just makes the implementation on the airline side a little bit easier, which is nice. We have different credit card billing options that the airline can select. There are options in IAR for the agency for error correction or modifications, and again, that's set by the airline and what they kind of decide to do, which is why those discussions between the agencies and the airlines is very important, just so you can understand, the way that the airline's going with this and their strategy and how they plan to implement NDC. We also do have an NDC identifier in IAR, so when NDC transactions are in IAR, you'll be able to see that it is an NDC transaction. And we do also include them on our outputs with ARC settlement. So for the agency, they are included on the BOSS file, and then for our airlines, they are included on the CAP file that we send to the airlines. Just a few more resources, as I mentioned, we have webinars such as this, we have our Travel Connect coming up, LinkedIn posts. We do on the ARC Corp website, on our corporate website, we have a section there for NDC and for distribution, and we have some resources there. One in particular that I want to point out that's fairly new that's out there, and it's called Getting Started with NDC. It's a document that you can either open up on the website or download and print out. We have two versions of that. One is for travel agencies and one is for airlines. And it just goes a lot more in depth into some of the things that I just covered during the presentation about things to consider, things to think about when you're looking at an NDC implementation. So I think that might be helpful for you, obviously, to look at the travel agency guide, and it might be helpful to even look at the airline side of it, the guide that we have for airlines, just so you can understand the different types of decisions and things that airlines are looking at as well, and how they're incorporating those into their strategies and how they're implementing NDC. And then lastly, I think before we get into some more questions here, I'm going to turn it over back to Judy for a minute. She's going to talk for just a minute about our Travel Connect conference coming up in October.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer and Todd and Shelley. It's been really good information. I'm going to get into some more questions. Before I do, the slide that Jennifer has up on our screen right now is our Travel Connect conference. And for anyone that's interested in being able to network with your peers in the industry, whether it's airline, it's in the agency community, or we even have third-party vendors, and some GDSs will be there. But it's a great conference. The theme of it this year is Distribution Evolved. So there will be a lot of great keynote speakers talking on this topic. Of course, NDC One Order will be sort of those that will be covered at Travel Connect, but you'll also be able to ask questions. Again, we'll have ARC personnel there. You'll have airline folks. So it's a really great opportunity just to hear kind of what's going on, what's happening in the industry, what's trending, and what does that future really look like, and what does that look like with ARC in the agency community and the airlines and the GDSs. So if you can do it, you can register for Travel Connect. You can go to arccorp.com/TravelConnect, and it will pull it up and you'll be able to register. It's a great conference. We may have an early bird special now going on, I don't know, but it's like $299. And again, it's just a great way to network. It starts on October 3rd, I believe. Let me just get that date on your thing, October 3rd through the 4th. So it's really good. And it ends a half a day on that Friday. And it's at our Lansdowne Resort, not ours, but it's in Lansdowne Resort, Virginia, which is really nice to get out of sort of the DC metro area. So we're trying something new this year. So hope to see you there. But before we end the call today, I do want to get to some more questions for Jennifer and Todd. And Shelley has had to go to another meeting, but these guys will be able to help. One of the things that keeps coming up, or a few of the questions, has been the speed of an office internet. Is there any particular speed that someone would have to have on their internet? Has that come up, or is it NDC can be used with whatever, as long as they have internet connectivity, right?
Yeah, I've not heard that at all.
Okay.
Again, I mean, break it down, NDC, just again, think of it as kind of the technology behind it. So in the schema, kind of the standard, I guess the actual products that would be built to kind of support it, applications or whatever may depend on that, but I have not heard that at all.
Okay, great. So that you have not heard as an issue.
Yeah.
There's a few more questions. One is asking, is NDC basically a leisure corporate tool, or how does it work for group and incentive agencies? And I'm assuming it can.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely, it could.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a perfect example of how an airline may choose to manage some of the group bookings. They may have special offers that they want to be able to put out for groups in certain markets. Again, I think that's one of those conversations to have with the airlines that you do a lot of business with. But like I said earlier, we are seeing, at least initially, the concentration in the corporate travel space. A lot of the corporate travel management tools are heavily involved in some of the NDC development as well. And again, some of that comes down to revenue for the airlines, particularly high-yielding customers, and knowledge of customers, frequent travelers, and an understanding of what they're looking for and what kinds of bundles of fare and ancillary services that they can put together for those particular segments.
Okay, thank you, Todd. This is another question that came in, and Todd, you may have touched on this a little bit earlier, but if an agency is using NDC, potentially in this case, I think they're referring to direct with an airline, and then they have other regular transactions, how they do it today, could this have an impact on their reporting? So some transactions in theory could be outside of ARC, and then they could have ARC processing. Is that true, or can you guys talk elaborate a little bit more about that?
Well, and again, that's one of the decision points that you have to make with the airline that you're working with the technology provider. I mean, certainly our preference would be to see those transactions being reported or settled through ARC, and that's one of the reasons why we're available and having conversations like this with our agency community, our agency customers, is because we understand how valuable that is to have that data coming back to you for settlement purposes, and to some degree for reporting to your clients as well. So that's definitely one of the questions that you need to ask about NDC transactions, and whether or not those will be settled and reported back through ARC to you in the traditional manner that you have today. I mean, we certainly want to encourage airlines to do that.
Okay, great, Todd. Thank you. Thank you, Todd. The global question that's coming out is this session being recorded, and will the PowerPoint presentation be available? Yes, on both. The recorded session will be on our website, arccorp.com. Go to training, and if you go all the way to the right-hand side, it'll say webinars on demand. You can click on that, and you can see all of our webinars that we've had so far this year in 2019. But look for it after, because it goes through marketing, and they create links for all of that. So look for about a week from now. If you want the PowerPoint presentation, just send me an email, jhoward@arccorp.com, and I'll get that to you. So if you're interested in that, just send me an email, and I will send you the PowerPoint presentation. Another question that, a couple of questions that have come in. Does NDC, or can it have the potential to reduce debit memos?
So I'll take that one. Actually, the answer to that is yes. It definitely has the potential to reduce debit memos. Because in an NDC environment where the airline is generating the offer and transactions are issued out of the airline's host system, the fare, taxes, and fees are calculated from that system. So in this case, the airline should not issue the debit memo if there was a fare, tax, or fee calculation error, because it's issued right out of their host system. So you know, for other reasons, debit memos, I mean, it may not totally eliminate them, but we do see the potential for it to definitely greatly reduce debit memos.
Okay, great. If an agency, this is another question that's come in, if an agency has a couple of direct connects, or NDC, let's say, not direct connects, but are working specifically just with the airline, and they're working with, say, a handful, will all of those offers be able to be shown at the same time?
That really depends on the technology provider that you're using, in terms of how that would be facilitated in a display. And again, I think that's been one of the things from a GDS perspective that they have tackled is, you know, how do you display traditional content and NDC offers together, so that you have a comparison point. And I would say that whatever technology provider that you're using for those direct connects, individual direct connects with airlines, you know, that you would pose that question to them in terms of how does all that get integrated into a single response that you can shop from, basically.
Perfect. And that's all items that, or topics that should come up in these conversations.
Absolutely.
And truly, all of the questions I think that are being asked here today, those are the really important questions I think that you should be having when you are having these NDC discussions. So, yeah, so all good points for all of you that have asked questions on the webinar today, because I think it's helpful for everybody to kind of be hearing the same things, because I think it's new and we're all kind of wondering about some of these things. So thanks for asking such good questions. Before we end, we have a few more minutes. I'm just going to see if there's a few more we can get in. Let me just look here. This one, and you may have talked about it, Jennifer. Is there a standard, I'm assuming it goes both ways for the agent and the airline, that there's an NDC standard schema for both agency and airline? So airlines have a standard, the NDC, there's just a standard with NDC. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the XML standard that IATA created for NDC is really just the standard, whether it's with the airline and the agency or technology provider, that everybody's kind of speaking the same language, if you will, with those different messages and message types. So that's really what the standard is. That it's the same thing between all parties.
But keep in mind, just like with fares, with inventory buckets, those kinds of things, I mean, there are different business rules that will be applied to those. So even though the schema, the standard communication is the same, the business rules that one airline decides on for their content may be slightly different than what airline B decides on, for example.
Absolutely. Thanks for that clarification.
Great. And what we're going to do is I'm going to forward all the questions on to Jennifer, Todd, and Shelley. And what I think we'll work on doing, if they aren't already in our FAQs regarding NDC, we'll incorporate these because they are really good. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to join us this afternoon. We do have a couple of other webinars coming up. We have the one June 26th. We'll be on our agency service fee product, and we'll talk a little bit about credit card processing as well. In July, we're going to have one on our payment form that's taking place, and we're going to do a follow-up on that, and that's about all our credit card payments. In August, we'll have Delta, and then we'll have our fraud month the whole month of September, so we'll look for that. We'll have about 10 different webinars, and then we have our Travel Connect in early October. I do want to just repeat my email address. Someone had asked. It's J, the letter J, Howard, at arccorp.com. And I know that this is a lot to digest, and you can call into our customer care center at 855-816-8003 always, and they can guide you or direct you to either Jennifer or Todd or Shelley, because some of these are more in-depth. And they do require a little bit of hand-holding. So if you do call into our customer care, just say if they could forward that information along to, the NDC folks and the NDC team here. Or you can always reach me. Like I said, you have my email. But we really want to help. ARC is, I guess, the main message. We're here to help, and we're here to support you through NDC. So please contact us. Ask us questions, and we do have a team here that will support the NDC effort. As always, thank you for taking the time to join us and be with us. Really, thank you, Jennifer, thank you, Todd, and thanks to Shelley. They will keep up to date. We'll probably be having another session, if not this year, early next year, to again just continue to try to provide updates on this really important topic. So again, thank you all, and hope to see you and have you on another webinar coming up soon.